Hey friends, welcome back. This week I sat down with Emily Starr and I cannot wait to share a conversation with you. Emily's an amazing woman who has followed God's leading in her life through many seasons. She and her husband founded their ministry, Reaching the Nations International, 18 years ago in Columbus, Ohio. Over the years, she's seen God work in mighty ways, using RT&I to minister not only to others, but Emily as well. On the show, Emily shares what it looks like to lean into a calling, how serving others teaches us more about ourselves than you might think, how God is sovereign in everything, and so much more. It is such an encouraging conversation, and I'm excited to share it with you. I hope it uplifts you and reminds you that God's calling is present even in the smallest parts of our life. I would love to hear your thoughts on what we discussed, so drop a comment and let's talk. Thanks God to Emily for sharing some of her time with us and giving us a glimpse into her life and her ministry. Be sure and check the link in the description to learn more about RT&I and the work Emily and Aaron are doing. Be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. Now, grab a cozy drink, turn up the volume, and enjoy.
I've been married to Aaron since 2003. And really, what brought us together is just a love for God and a love for ministry and a love for people. We met in Venezuela, South America. So we mainly had talked about overseas missions. But at one time, we had the opportunity to begin youth pastoring at a church. And so many young people from just one neighborhood in our city, Columbus, Ohio, started coming to our youth group, even though it was actually a few miles away. And as we got to know these young people better, we met the first young person from our neighborhood called Milo Grogan in February 2005. And just as we got to know some of these young people and start to understand how they viewed the world, coming from a neighborhood that historically dealt with poverty, is historically African American community in the inner city of Columbus, Ohio, and just how they saw the world was so different than my rural Kentucky upbringing. It really challenged, that how we live, the world around us really shapes who we are and how we see the world. And I just wanted to understand my kids better. I call them my kids, my young people, and also be a bigger part of their lives. So Aaron and I started talking about, could we move from our apartment into a house in the neighborhood? And we started looking for houses. And I still remember when our realtors sent us pictures of our house, we knew it was the one. We just knew it was the one. So we bought our house in February 2007 and then started our ministry, Reaching the Nations, RT&I, that same year, later on in 2007. Really just with the vision of life on life discipleship in hard places. We originally thought God would call us to overseas ministry, but as we just fell in love with our neighborhood and our families, the families in the neighborhood, we knew that God had just a bigger plan, a different plan than what we originally talked about when we were talking about getting married and spending life together. And we began cultivating this vision for young people from the inner cities of the United States being called and being equipped to go to the nations as missionaries, to strengthen the church and to start new churches, to go to the far places of the world, to go to the hard places of the world, to preach the gospel and make disciples. So that's always been our vision from the beginning. We just see our kids, our young people, having unique skills for global missions. We see them as not backing down from a fight. They're not afraid of hard things. They're not afraid of challenges. And I just love discipling them. We do ministry. Kind of our main focus or our main goal is just small group discipleship. We love church and we love the church, but we also believe that it's our job to not only bring people to church, but bring church to people, so to speak, that we can gather anywhere. We can gather in homes. We can gather in rec centers. We can gather in playgrounds and learn about Jesus together. And then hopefully, yes, on that Sunday morning church gathering as well. but don't limit what God can do to those who are willing to walk through the doors of a church. But
Right.
it can go beyond that. And it's just been such a blessing to me because I feel like when I don't know how old I was, 21 maybe when we moved into Milo Grogan, I knew God was calling me and I wanted to be a blessing to my neighbors, but I just had no idea that the almost 19 years that we've lived here, what a blessing my neighbors and my young people would be to me.
So, what was that like then when you say starting a ministry? I mean, I feel like most people, when they think about like ministries, a lot of things that come to mind are like the Red Cross and like these like really kind of large ministries. But obviously, when you guys were just starting, it wasn't a large ministry. It was just you and Aaron, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had no staff, we had other jobs ourselves. It was just us like trying to understand what God was calling us into. I think we started a nonprofit because our pastor at that time was like, "Hey, you should start a nonprofit so you can work with lots of different churches to carry out your vision of life on life discipleship." So that was kind of the beginning of our TNI. And it's a slightly different vision than a lot of nonprofits, just because our focus is literally discipleship versus a
Right.
lot of nonprofits might have a more physical focus, whether that's housing or food or medical attention. So, in a lot of ways, we could have almost set up as a church um, without a building, without a
Right.
congregation gathering. Um, I remember that the most exciting part is just knowing that God was calling us to do this, knowing that He was calling us to go where we were going and to be with the people we were being with. I think the challenging part was just not knowing how. It's like we knew the what, but we didn't know the how. And I just remember, as being in my early 20s and getting so much advice from other people, from older people, and often not knowing how to do the things that they were saying. You should do this or you should do that. But I didn't feel like that person or those people were coming alongside and holding my hand and saying, "Let me show you how." Or even
Right.
sometimes I was like, that worked for you. I don't feel like that would work for me, but I don't have the language or I don't even have the confidence to say that I'm just going to try to follow your instructions, but I don't understand them. Or just being like nodding my head, smile, and walk away and be like, yeah, no, that just doesn't make sense to me. But also thankful for the mentors who did come alongside. My mind just went straight to one of our elderly neighbors who has since passed away. But we met her because her little granddaughter had started coming to our Bible study at age 5. I think we moved here in 2007. I believe we met her in 2008. And what a godsend she was. That she saw that our motives were, I want to say pure, but no one's motives are 100% pure. But she saw that we didn't have any ulterior reason for being here, that we just wanted to help kids and families grow in their faith and be strengthened in the Lord. She just really took us under her wing. She would invite us over for meals and give us advice and gently correct when we said things that really were inappropriate or offensive for the place and space. And she ended up being a board member as well as volunteer with us. And, um, folks like her, that's who walked alongside of us in the same way that we want to walk alongside our young people step by step.
What did it look like for you guys as I mean, I'll say a young married couple? Y'all had been married for a few years kind of when you started this, but what did that look like kind of in the balance of life with you both working other jobs and still, sacrificing time to this like ministry vision that God gave you? How did you guys handle that?
Yeah, it was a big change because I remember at first when we first got married, we spent so much time together and we just had a little apartment, no yard work, no house repairs or anything, and just um, always just being planning to be home when Aaron got off of work. And so focused on each other, and I'm so thankful for those times together. But we were just so excited to do the work together that I think there's something beautiful about a married couple just knowing that yes, they're together to enjoy each other first and last, but also that God may have brought them together for a bigger reason. That synergy that the two together make more than the two single people apart. But
Right.
we did have our bumps and bruises along the way, like like having your husband as your boss, so to speak. It can be challenging. Like that's been our dynamic now for 18 and a half years. Actually 19. I don't know why I'm saying 18 and a half. And I think we moved on, like, what did I say? In February 2007. So it's actually coming
Yeah.
up on 19. So yeah, just having Aaron as my boss for 19 years, and not that it's not a partnership, but he does have that role of the CEO. So recognizing that he is kind of more of the visionary, and I tend to be more of the okay, let's go figure out how to make that happen, hands and feet. So probably most of our fights have been about ministry stuff,
Which,
unfortunately.
I mean, you have to have both sides. You have to have the visionary, but
Yeah.
then you also have to have the practical person stepping back and going, "Okay, that's a wonderful vision. How do we execute on that? What steps
Yeah,
do we need to
and
actually do to get there?"
so often I feel like just me not knowing how to say, "Hey, that actually I can't do that right now," or like if you don't stand up and say, "Hey, like that doesn't work for me," then the other person's assuming that it does work for you. So I think I definitely had to find my voice along the way. I just didn't learn that in my childhood or my young adulthood. So now I am learning to say, "Hey, this is what I can do. This is what I can't." And but that doesn't mean always staying in your comfort zone. Work, um, by definition, is sometimes doing things that aren't fun. Being with the kids is always fun, but the admin part that comes with having a nonprofit, or even the planning, or even sometimes there's conflict resolution among team members, volunteers, staff, all those things that even, we own ministry houses. We are now remodeling a ministry center. Like there's just hands-on things that you have to do. Somebody has to scrub that toilet, or take out that trash. Those are the things that can become not as fun.
Yeah, those are the administrative side that there's always an administrative side to everything, and I think that often gets glossed over in the glamour of whatever the activity is,
Yeah.
but that's okay. We live and we learn in that.
Yes, we do.
So I mean, growing up, did you think ministry was the direction you were going? Or did you have other kind of dreams that you set aside for the calling that God put on your guys' life to start the ministry?
Honestly, from a very young age, I did visualize myself in ministry. Um, there was a dream that God put in my heart at age maybe 15, and that was caring for orphans. And I really thought that meant that I would be caring, like having an orphanage in Venezuela. Interestingly enough, that right now there are more Venezuelan orphans than ever before. Um, but that's not the work that we're doing right now. Just to clarify, all of the students who come to our ministry um, are African American. We have only one young lady who her mom is from Mauritania, and now my niece and nephew live with us. They are white, but in the most part, we don't have a big, like, even though Columbus is a huge immigrant, community, we don't actually have a lot of immigrant students coming in our programming. But um, okay, the original question was, did I visualize myself in ministry, or did I have to set aside that dream? I do remember setting aside my personal dreams, getting married, being like, okay, like when the two of us come together, now it's not me, it's us. But I really never felt a sense of sacrifice, like, oh, I had this other dream to, go be a fashion designer or go be a banker or, you know, a chemist. And now God has like taken me out of that world into ministry. No, I always felt called to full time ministry, just didn't know what that would look like. And definitely as a younger, young adult or young child in my rural farming community in Liberty, Kentucky, didn't necessarily know even anything about big cities or what city life looked like. But I always had just known that God did have like a call on my life.
How often do you think people miss that call because they either don't hear it or they're too scared to walk in it?
Whoa, girl, that's such an interesting question. I think God calls every believer to live missionally. And I think sometimes we can sit around waiting for the big thing to happen and we miss the little thing. Were you kind this morning to the people that you live with? Were you kind to the service people in your life today? The at the grocery store or the gas station or the person who delivered your appliance. I think showing kindness and just showing God's love and showing God's character to all people is the first step. And I definitely don't think everyone is called to full time ministry because then, there wouldn't be like anybody making bread or delivering the bread or, making our internet work for us. So I think that living missionally is number one, but I do see people that just seem to hold back. Um, and I think we all do it in little and small ways. You can be a full time ministry and still hold back from what God is really calling you to do for that season or for that day. So I think there's like big yeses in our life, and then I think they're followed up by a lot of little yeses.
What do you think are the big reasons that people don't say yes to the big yeses? Think
Oh,
it's just fear?
I would say there's fear. I think there's just these expectations that we get in our mind of like how life should look like or what other people expect of us or what's going to be good. Um, God really hasn't called us to an easy life. He never said, like, follow me and I'll make your life easy. And sometimes we equate, the easy life or I don't know, the smooth sailing life with the good life. And I just don't think that that's true, even when we read the scripture, and we see Jesus and his followers, whether you're looking at the Old or New Testament, that the easy and good just are not synonyms at all. And I think the more we embrace that and the more we say, God, what are you doing? What are you doing right now in my life or in my family's life? How can I how can I get in your wave? I just picture an ocean, and it's okay to be crashed by the waves if it's God's waves. Like, don't fight
You
against the
know?
waves. Like, you just have to flow with that wave if it's what God is trying to do. And so often, maybe we just want that moment in our life to be different than what it is. And I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about now. So maybe you should ask another question.
I don't know. I think about it sometimes where, because I historically have struggled with wanting to be in control of things and wanting to be able to do risk assessments on things and like, put really good plans in place. And there have been times in my life where I don't have a good way to do that because it's outside of my scope as a human. Like what I'm trying to plan and risk manage is like the God level of life, not my level of life? And I think that's one of the really hard things for people is, especially when they hear about people who are in full-time ministry, they're like, well, like I can't do that. I'm not making those impacts because like I have responsibilities or don't feel called to that or whatever it is. There's a reason that they say, I can't, well, I can't do that. So like it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. But like you said, it's so much of it is the little things. And that's its own sacrifice is choosing to be like, oh, I'm not going to be irritated, when someone cut me off in traffic and I'm going to go out of my way to be, gracious and polite and thankful to people. is its own almost dying to self because it's not most people's nature. I don't think it's human nature to be like Jesus because we have sin nature.
Yeah, 100% agree. Like, it's just, we have to, I think it's how we start our day too. Do we start our day like surrendering to the Lord and talking to Him about, being thankful, but also just talking to Him about how we're doing physically, mentally, emotionally, and getting in the right mindset to, you know, reflect God's character that day. And something else came to mind when you were talking too, because you had originally asked too about like, do people miss their call? And something I see a lot of is debt. Americans are real good, for just getting in debt, and then they say, "You know what? I wish I could be in youth ministry. I wish
Mhm.
I could, mentor kids. I wish I could do this thing, even if it's not working for a nonprofit. Maybe it's working for a for-profit, but in a more people-facing capacity that's not a very balling, not a very balling job. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's so many ways that we can buy things that we can't afford. And then we're kind of stuck in this cycle. And I've just seen a big connection between contentment and freedom. And don't get me wrong, I know it's hard out there right now. Like, I just got
Oh,
back
yeah.
from the grocery store. I'm not saying like it's real. Like, we have to pay our bills,
Right.
and keep like responsibility. I'm not saying don't pay your bills, but just the idea that what if we didn't actually need a new trash can? Like, what if the trash can that we have that has a little rust in the bottom of it is okay? And instead of comparing ourselves to that coworker where we went to their house and everything was perfect, to the majority of the world, and said, you know what? It's okay. It's okay that my coat is outdated. It's okay that my, whatever. And that doesn't, I'm not trying to say like don't have nice things, because you do you. You're a child of God, and be blessed. But at the same time, I just do see a connection between people getting in such a spending, working, spending, that there's no space to think about. Could I change careers? Or could I work less hours? Or could
Right.
God be calling me to volunteer more of my time because life is just so expensive? Now, I know you live in Florida, so I'm sorry for even bringing it up.
It
Florida's
you know,
expensive.
it's expensive. And it's one of those things too where Ben and I have always held the opinion of there are certain things that we choose not to purchase because we don't want that debt, like you said. Like, we're not going to go out and buy, 2026 vehicles. And if that's what you want to do, you're more than welcome to, right? But it's not something we're going to do because we don't have the cash flow to, buy a 2026 vehicle in cash.
Yeah,
And
because then
I
you're
don't want to say I'm
strapped
going to
and
buy
you're
this
miserable.
vehicle, right? I don't want to buy this vehicle and now I have a $600 payment or a $1,200 payment on my car every month just so that I can have a super, super nice car. Even though don't get me wrong, I like nice cars. I car shop all the time. But as a family, we've said that's not how we're going to steward the money God's given us, right? We want to be able to have flexibility to support people in our lives, and we want to have flexibility to, give and invest in different ministries like RT and I, where we say, hey, this is something that I want to support the mission of, but we need the financial bandwidth to do that. So that's one of the priorities we've set as a family is, we're not going to do some of these things in order to do things in other areas of life. And I don't think that's I think the data would probably show that's not a very popular American mindset, whether that's inside the church or outside of the church, just because I think as a country, we're so blessed. There's so much readily available to us that it's just not, it's not a normal mindset to say I'm okay, I'm content without, right? That newest thing or the nicest thing or whatever it is.
Yeah, and I'm even going to challenge the word blessed and put the word privileged there. Because blessed, we are blessed, but some of the overflow that we have is not necessarily coming, because of God. It's coming because
Right.
of kind of overextending ourselves. And um that's my thing. I can't unsee what I've seen, you know, in first of all, just right here in the neighborhood that I live, the people, struggling financially. But I can't unsee what I've seen in some of the neighborhoods in the outskirts of Lima, Peru, or the desert of Venezuela and Colombia, or the mountainsides of Venezuela, or the beautiful island of Haiti. Like, I can't unsee how some other folks are living and then just like spend everything on myself. Um, Mind you, my fridge is full. We have two cars. So maybe we should get off of this subject because I don't want to sound like judgmental toward anyone else. It's just um, there might be a connection between contentment and being able to do the things that you want to do in ministry.
I would agree with that. And I would be curious to know your perspective on it just from like a biblical fulfillment sense, because scripture talks about serving in whatever capacity you're called to serve in. And it doesn't talk about it in a burden sense, but I feel like a lot of people, and I certainly have, in previous positions I've been in where I feel like whether that's serving week in and week out at church or serving with a ministry or wherever that falls, it almost feels like something I do because I'm supposed to. But then you go and do it, and it's as much a blessing to you as it is to everybody else. Would you say that's like something you regularly see and feel through the ministry of it's not as much of a burden as some people might think it is?
It is not a burden and it's not a sacrifice. And I feel like I've had friends over the years who have used that language to describe my lifestyle and, our choices. And I'm just like, I don't see it like that. I mean, yes, there's moments when it's been hard, but I don't visualize any other life. Like, this is what I'm called to do. Now, I definitely don't do it perfectly. And um I've definitely been stressed plenty of times, and that's when I'm just not resting in the Lord, when I'm not trusting God. But I can't even visualize it as a sacrifice because it brings so much joy just to be with the young people and the families that I hang out with, and to invest in kids, invest in lives, watch them grow up. One way that we know how long that we've lived here is because our next door neighbor was born a couple of months after we moved here. And I know he's 18 right now and turning 19 um, in April. So I'm like, oh, yeah, it is almost 19, or it is
Yeah.
19 years. And just to watch a young man like go from a newborn to, a beautiful man of God that he is. And of course, we don't always get to be in touch that long with people. People come and go, and sometimes they might only come for a few days or a few months. But the ones, especially the ones that we've been able to either watch grow up from, infancy to young adulthood, or from young adulthood to, middle age, is just such a blessing. I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I just, if God calls me to a different place or a different thing, then I hope we would say yes as a family. But it's just, yeah, it's not a sacrifice. It's really not. It's just a good life. I don't wish for something else. And I have to say, and this is where I get choked up, that this is literally the biggest blessing in my whole entire life came from this ministry and this lifestyle, because my son, who we adopted from birth, is his birth mother was one of our students who we knew from age 6. And if we hadn't been here, we wouldn't have known her. And if we hadn't stayed in touch with her, she wouldn't have thought of us, as an option to parent her child. And our son Xavier is just the biggest blessing. Like, he's just our biggest gift. Like, every time, maybe at church, and they're like, "Oh, what has God like blessed you with, or what are you praying for?" And I'm like, "My son, like, is such a blessing to us. Like, we waited 18 years to become parents, and like, I just cannot imagine. I cannot imagine any bigger blessing than just being married to Aaron and having Xavier as our son, and now we have our niece and nephew that we get to care for as well." But specifically, just talking about Xavier and how that blessing came from just being here in our neighborhood of Milo Grogan, being um, faithful to stay in touch with families and students. And so that's my gift from the Lord. As I tell Xavier, you are 1,000 Christmases to me. Like, I never need another Christmas present, birthday present. Like, you don't need to send me a card. And not to put pressure on him that he has to like be this like blessing all the time. Like, he's just a regular kid, but um just yeah, that's my gift from God. So
I love looking back on my life, and I love talking to people about looking back on their lives and seeing where God moved that you didn't even necessarily notice at the time. Because I do that now. And I was talking to my younger brother the other day, and he was like, dude, it's crazy how God works. Like, I was over here and I needed this thing, and then I met this dude and it all worked out, and I didn't see any of that coming. And I'm like, I know, it's so cool. And I can do the same thing where I can sit back and I can look back at things in my life that I didn't fully understand at the time, or I might not have wanted at the time. And I go, oh, there was a purpose to that.
that's what he was doing.
He does
Yeah.
know the plan.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that 100%. Just looking back and say, "Oh, okay, God has been faithful. God, you've been so faithful. Why am I stressed about the future? Because you've been so faithful. Like, you've just been above and beyond. And even when we didn't know how all the pieces fit together, he knew. And same with the pieces that we're looking at right now. He knows how they fit together. And once
I
again, going
remember,
back to, really easy life,
no, yeah,
but good life.
for sure. I remember so I didn't get married until I was upper 20s. How old was I? 26, 27? I don't remember. Somewhere up there when I got married. But I spent like pretty much a solid decade just being single. And I remember it always killed me because I was like, I want to be married, right? Like, I want that, but that's not like, God hasn't made a way for that yet. And it was a very long season, and it was a hard season. And then I met Ben, and was friends with him for several years. And then he asked me out, and I panicked when he asked me out because I was like, I've never considered being in a relationship with you. Like, we've been friends for years. Like, I didn't even think about it. And I was like, sure, I'll go out. So we went out, and now obviously we're married, and it's wonderful, and I absolutely love it. But when we got married, the song I walked down the aisle to was an instrumental version of Goodness of God, because it just was such a fulfillment of like so much prayer and like, God, I want this, and I know you're good, and I know you're God. So it's got to be in like your timing and your plan. And by the time we got to our wedding, I was like, this is so different than anything I would have planned 5 years ago or 2 years ago, even. Like, this is just so not what I ever would have expected, but it is so good. And now every time that song comes on, it makes me smile because it's like like a constant reminder that he is good and he is faithful and he has always been faithful and he's not going to stop being faithful now. And I love it so much.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's like all those moments when maybe you wished for a relationship or you wondered if, okay, is it ever going to happen for me? And yet, who knew God had been for you? Like, not
Right?
just some guy, but like Ben.
He's great.
Yeah,
And I love it because I think it's very easy to get distracted and get caught up in our lives and almost get bogged down in the details of our life and forget that like God is still moving. He has still been moving. Like, he's gotten us here. He's going to take us wherever he's going to take us next.
amen.
And I think people can get very scared. I get very scared. I ask all the time. I'm like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if this doesn't work out? And Ben's like, you can't be stressed about the what ifs. And I'm like, oh, yes, I can.
Watch me. Right. And I mean, it's good to plan and it's good to think about the if then scenarios, but at the end of the day, you just know that God will always be God, like no matter what. And even if the worst tragedy like did come into our lives, that like God would still be there.
Which is so encouraging. It's so encouraging to know that that foundation is always going to be there.
Yeah.
How would you encourage people who are maybe feel that pull to serve in a new capacity or to branch out and volunteer in a new capacity, but aren't quite sure how or if it's safe, I'll say, to do that? Maybe there's a little fear there. How would you encourage those people having walked through so many seasons of that kind of stepping out in faith?
Yeah, I love baby steps. You maybe you feel like God's calling you to help single moms. Okay, before you just go and just make this huge plan and this huge thing, could you do a one time? Could you go volunteer with a ministry one time? Maybe they have an event coming up and they need some extra hands. Could you just take some groceries to one family one time? Like, let's start small and go from there instead of all these huge ideas that never materialize. I mean, wonderful about dreaming big, like go big, but is there something you can literally do today? Of course, prayer, of course, talking with wise counsel. But beyond that, I just love to underpromise and overdeliver. Like just the concept of like, what can I do today that just can go in that direction, but it doesn't have to be as big as I want it to be. Because sometimes you do the small thing, it's just all those parables about like, hey, you were faithful in the small, now I can trust you with more. And sometimes it's just taking like a baby step and then little by little you see how the door opens.
Do you think people feel like the baby steps aren't enough? I mean, because obviously you've interacted with so many people who are either supporting the ministry or people you're serving with the ministry. And do you ever sit down with people and be like, hey, what if we start here? And they're like, that's not enough.
Something I've seen so much of is people quitting because they don't feel like they're making a difference.
Mm,
A volunteer will come and maybe they'll serve at a teen Bible study. And our teens aren't just lining up to say thank you and, run up to them and give them a hug and a kiss. And they're just there and they're um, helpful, in my opinion. But then they're like, man, I'm just not making a difference. Like, and I think that's the concept of not enough. And it's like, but little do you know that when you quit, three kids are going to ask, oh, well, where's so and so? Where's the one with glasses? Like, where did they go? Why did they quit? Why did they leave us? And it's like, sometimes it can be awkward to say, oh, well, I try to make up like a tangible reason. Like, a lot of times people maybe they had a job change or a life circumstance change or something, but it's like, I can't just say, oh, well, they didn't feel like they were making a difference because you didn't
yeah.
like voice how much you appreciated them. Um, that's not on our kids to like, you know, of course we want to teach them to say thank you or to communicate well with other people, but at the end of the day, it's not whether or not the person you're serving says thank you or even if that you can
Right.
see. Of course we want to see outward change. Of course we want to see transformation and revival and just lives changed for the, you know, by the gospel of Jesus Christ. But at the end of the day, like change starts from the inside out. So I know my answer is just a little bit different than what you were asking, but what I see is not so much people like not starting because they think it's not big enough, although I'm sure there's that, but I've just seen so many people start and then quit because they feel like it's not big enough. And meanwhile, it's like you actually were making a difference. You just couldn't see it. And maybe you didn't even stay long enough for that young person to feel comfortable enough to really open up to you, but it didn't mean that they weren't listening to you when you were sharing your
Right.
heart, or they didn't appreciate you when you were reaching out. um,
My mom always calls it seed planting.
yeah.
You never know what seeds you're planting and when they're going to grow. Our job is to plant the seeds and let the Lord grow them.
Yeah. I Of course, you want excellence, and you want to make sure that, hey, am I doing this in the most efficient way, or the most, fruitful way possible? Like, you do want to see the fruit. But I just feel like the work of discipleship, or the work of like what God's calling you to do, is to be faithful in planting the seeds and not be so worried about who gets the harvest. Like, don't just keep doing the same dumb thing and you can tell it's not working.
Right.
But at the same time, is you're planting, you're watering, and God makes the harvest.
Have you ever heard the story of how Billy Graham got exposed to the gospel?
I have it. I don't remember. I don't remember the man's name, or
Yeah, well, so I was listening to something the other day and it was talking about how Billy Graham and a friend showed up at this giant revival at one point and it was like super full and there was an usher who found them two seats. Like they were going to leave because it was so full. And then there was an usher who found them two seats. And the conversation I was listening to, he was like, nobody knows the name of that usher. Like
yeah,
he just was doing what he was called to do and be faithful in it. And then because he found them seats, they then heard the gospel. And that was when Billy Graham basically gave his life to Christ. And then we know kind of where Billy Graham went and the things he did. And I feel like it's very, very easy to be I'm not the one on stage. Like, I'm not the one, preaching the gospel, or I'm not the one doing X, Y, or Z. So does it really matter? But like you said, it definitely matters. It just, you might not see it in the way you expected to see it,
yeah, that makes sense.
which can be hard. It can be hard for people I mean, it's going to be hard for me when I feel like I don't see anything happening. I'm like, it's like just spinning your wheels. But with biblical work, it's never really just spinning your wheels.
Right. It's like every small thing matters. It's like how you do it is as important as what you do. Like, are you doing it in faith and in humility and in love? Whether it's mopping a floor, or
Someone has to.
picking up your toddler's toys, or if it's something, greeting and ushering at church, or if it's, the big, more glamorous thing.
Day in and day out. And that's something I think people can do regardless of where they're at. Because I know it, like even when I go to work, I try and be like, okay, I want to be a reflection of Christ at work. Because I don't know where my coworkers are. I don't know what they're dealing with, and I don't know, what conversations I'm going to have today. And I am by no means perfect at it. I struggle day in and day out, I will honestly say. But in the morning I'm driving to work and I'm like, I want to be a representation of Christ here, just like if I was at, youth group or serving kids church or whatever it is, because I heard someone say one time that they viewed their job as their mission field
Yeah.
because they said, I know most of my coworkers aren't believers. So that's the mission field I'm in right now. That's where I can represent Christ and have conversations as I build relationships with people. And I just thought it was a beautiful idea.
Yeah, and let your actions speak louder than your words, of like how you treat people, just how you live your life, your ethics and everything. I love what you said about, you don't know what kind of day someone's had. Maybe they're rude to you or inconsiderate, and you don't realize that their toddler woke them up at 4 a.m., or that they got an eviction notice that day, or just whatever is going on in their life. Maybe it's not something big, maybe it's just something that they're working through, but maybe their mama just never taught them better. But either,
There's
either
grace in that
way,
too.
either way, it's that soft answer that turns away wrath, that how you think they might deserve to be treated versus like what's really going to make change in the situation.
Yeah. It's definitely a hard thing to do. It's an easy thing to say to do. It's a hard thing to do in application.
Yes, it is. Well,
It's
and
definitely
especially
a
because a lot of times when we are unkind or, you know, impatient with the people around us, it's because something took us by surprise. If we go into a meeting saying, "Oh, we know that this person is stressed, so we're going to be patient," it's one thing. But when something just comes out of nowhere, that's when we're like, our reaction is just not as godly because we just weren't psyched up for that moment.
yeah. It
Like,
we almost take it personally. Whereas if you
yeah.
know somebody's having a bad day, you don't take anything personally because you know it's not about you. But if you don't know that, I think it's a lot easier to be like, "Oh, they're doing this to me or because of me or at me." And that makes it far easier to be angry about it because it feels personal as opposed to knowing there's entirely unrelated circumstances that are lending, to that action or that word.
Yeah, and we see this so much in ministry where, let's say that, our client, so to speak, whether that's the person we're serving, whatever ministry you have, whether you're serving them food or they're in your Bible study but you're the leader, um we're like, okay, we're here to like serve someone who we have low expectations. Maybe we already know like, hey, they're coming with these different life challenges. But then our coworkers, we're thinking, hey, you're volunteering alongside of me, or you're my pastor, or you're on the team. For whatever reason, we expect those people to like somehow have it together and like not be
Right.
immature. And so often that's who we get mad at, or that's who we like harbor grudges because we're thinking, oh, I already know that like if I'm serving food to hungry people, there might be things going on in their lives that are hard. But the person who's serving alongside of me, we don't know what's going on in their life that's hard. So therefore we just don't exercise the same form of patience. And it's like only God is perfect. So our expectations of humans, on the other hand, should be that everyone's going to have an off day or that everyone's going through something. And I just remember hearing the statistics of like missionaries quitting early. And
Mm,
almost always it was conflict with other missionaries. It wasn't the hard circumstances of the country that they were in or not being able to raise the funds or just being homesick or something. No, it was literally just I can't live with these people that I have to live with.
yeah.
And that's so real because conflict is real and conflict is hard. Um, and that like conflict gives us the opportunity to trust God more.
I feel like praying for like asking God to help you give grace feels like praying for patience where you don't just get the extra grace, you get the opportunities to show
To
grace.
practice it. Yeah, that's good.
And then you get in that moment and you forgot that you even asked for that and then you miss it and God's gracious and loving enough to go, "Okay, we'll work on it again. That's okay." But then you look back and go, "Oh, that was a moment."
Yeah. I had such a moment of impatience. I think it was just yesterday or maybe the day before when the water was frozen in our kitchen because it's 0 degrees here in Ohio. And so it's like but we have water in our bathroom, so no biggie. And I'm like hauling water all day. I'm like hauling water from the bathroom to wash the dishes. And I'm like cooking for my family. And then I asked my 10-year-old nephew, like every day they have to do a little bit of dishes. So it's like, hey, like, come do these dishes. And he was like complaining. And I was like, oh my goodness, I left him the smallest amount. Like, I already have the water ready, heated up. And just, I was so frustrated. And then he came and I guess the water was too hot. So he like drops the dishes and breaks them. I was just
Oh,
like, just
no.
go away. And my voice was so mean. And I felt so bad because I really don't care about the dishes that got broken, although it did feel like carelessness, but it was more so the complaining that was going on as well, which is a total normal way for a 10-year-old to communicate. But I think I was feeling sorry for myself because it's like, don't you see what I've already done for you today? Like, um, kind of expecting gratitude instead of um, just knowing that he may have felt a little disoriented too with the water situation. And yeah, we want to cultivate gratitude in our kids, but um, we don't need to like throw up in their faces like what we've done for them, because
Right.
kids deserve to be cared for and kids should be cooked and cleaned for. That's just part of
That's the
care.
parenting side of
That's
parenting.
that's part of caregiving that an adult is supposed to do for a child, and to teach them, of course, responsibility and chores, so that they're ready to be an adult someday. But it was just um, one of those things where it was like it took me by surprise. Like, why am I using this tone with this child who I love? But it was more so sometimes it's like those combination of factors where it's like multiple stressors coming at you at once. And so that's where the repair can come in, when you have the opportunity to apologize and say, hey, I was wrong and I'm sorry. And how can we make sure moving forward, you know, maybe there needs to be a consequence for complaining, but the consequence isn't me losing my cool, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and, thank God that God has shown us the way back when we break that relationship with each other, that it's through repentance and forgiveness and repair, because he knew that we would mess it up. So
Yeah.
we have the
He knew.
tools. We have the
He
tools
knew.
to say, I'm sorry and I love you. And whether that's with our child or our spouse or our coworkers. And of course, not every relationship can be repaired, but every wrong can be forgiven.
It's definitely a learning. It is a process of sanctification, but
Yep, little by little.
well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about, the ministry and your insight on things.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. And sorry that the video aspect didn't work, but I'm so glad we got to chat. Miss you here in
Not a
Columbus, but
problem.
I'm glad you're in sunny Florida. So great for you.
Where would be the best place for people to go if they wanted to get more information about RTNI?
Yeah, our website is reachtni.org. So reachtni.org. And I believe our Instagram is RTNI Columbus.
Okay.
So
And I'll link the description to the website or the link to the website as well
yeah,
so people can find it.
thanks so much. Yeah, reach out with questions. I believe there's when you contact the info at Reach TNI, it goes to where I check it. So feel free to feel free to ask questions or make comments.
Thanks so much for listening, friends. I hope you found this week's conversation as encouraging and joyful as I did. Thanks again to Emily for taking the time to chat and share some of her story with us. It's always a pleasure to hear about people's journey and the work God's doing in their lives. Thank you for tuning in week after week and being a part of the show. Be sure and follow on Spotify and YouTube so you never miss an episode. Leave a like, a comment, or a review so we can connect more deeply about the episode topics as well. I can't wait to see what the next conversation brings. Until next week, let's talk about it.